This is my first attempt at an ASMR video. I will be going over the entire roster of New Japan Pro Wrestling. I've been a fan of NJPW since the summer of 2019. I started watching it when both Jon Moxley and Kenta left the WWE, or Dean Ambrose and Hideo Itami at the time left WWE and went to go work the G1. So I did kind of miss that period that I think most Western fans think of when they think of New Japan Pro Wrestling, which was when, Kazuchika Okada had the title for 2 years, Kenny Omega was a big name, Tetsuya Naito was still kind of active on top of the card, that sort of time period. I wasn't around for that, and I'm really not one to go back and watch stuff from before I got into it either. I just like to kind of stay in the moment with wrestling, give or take a few matches here or there. But anyways, that's me. But I love New Japan Pro Wrestling. I have stuck with it through, 2021, 2022, when I've got no problem saying it was horrible. Actually, I don't think it was horrible. I think the clap crowds are bad. I think the product was horrible throughout 2024. But I stuck with it anyways. I think Japanese wrestling is great. Just the presentation, the style, the culture around it. And right now I'm overall quite happy with where New Japan is. We're in the middle of Best of the Super Juniors as I'm recording this, which I think has had a pretty poor B block, if I'm being honest. I don't like a lot of the wrestlers in that group. But the A block potentially is my favorite tournament block I've ever seen since I started watching New Japan. So I'll definitely make a video about that later too. But yeah, let's get into this video first. And also, I just wanted to say, I got this idea from this video by the ASMR fanatic, so I just wanted to give credit. I'll put a link to it in the description. So, first we have Aaron Wolf, and I think we're starting off with someone who a lot of people have a lot of opinions about. Me personally, I liked his debut match with Evil. He really hasn't had a match that has impressed me a ton since then. There's a lot of discourse about how he's been booked so far because he has exclusively worked with House of Torture, except for one match, which I'll get to. I think that the question really should be, should New Japan have debuted him? It's obvious why they did. They're not doing the numbers that they were doing 10 years ago, obviously. And he is a name with a lot of hype about him from outside of the industry. He could bring a lot of new fans in. I'm sure he did for Wrestle Kingdom. But, Aaron Wolf began training to be a pro wrestler during the G1 last year. It was around that same time. And so think about that. He's not even a year in. Your average young lion is training for 2 years in private before they're even debuted as an actual performer in front of the television, right? So, he is a really special case, and I do think you could be very easily putting him in a position to fail by debuting him so soon in his career. And putting him with House of Torture makes sense in that regard because those are easier matches, quote unquote. A lot of bells and whistles, a lot of things to cover him up. All he really has to do is get beaten up for a while and then, give Bad Luck Fale an Olympic Slam. What I will say is that he had the one match that was not against House of Torture, and it was on the New Japan Cup Tour this year. An opening match, for some reason, him and Masatoru Yasuda faced the Knockout Brothers, and it was pretty much a squash match. And the Knockout Brothers, obviously Yasuda, the young lion, is the one who got pinned, but they beat the shit out of Aaron Wolf as well. And they beat him up after the match. They talked loads of shit about him in the post-match comments, and I was more interested in Aaron Wolf following that match and during that match than I have been at any other point in his run so far. I think there's way more interesting of a story to be told with him having to cut his teeth and get hazed essentially by the rest of the roster than just working the exact same tag matches against House of Torture, teaming with Toru Yano and Master Wato and Ryusuke Taguchi over and over and over and over again. And so, right now, they're leading up to him facing Ren Narita at Dominion for the Never title. He's almost certainly going to win that match, and I'm really curious to see how things play out. Honestly, if it wasn't on television, if it wasn't being aired on TV Asahi, I think there'd be a chance Narita would retain. He's not going to because they're going to want to air Aaron's Wolf big comeback victory on television like that, but the reason that was in my head is because I was thinking, after Aaron Wolf wins the title, what's next? If you've spent all this time having him work almost entirely with House of Torture, you're going to put a belt on him now and expect him to have a legitimate run. He's probably going to be in the G1. Are you all of a sudden going to try to elevate him to work at the same level as his contemporaries when, again, he has not been even training for a year at this point? So, I think there's upside in him, absolutely, and I hope things go well for him. But I'm just very curious to see how things play out for him in the future. Up next is Boltin Oleg. I love Boltin Oleg. I think he's awesome. I think it's awesome that we have a wrestler from Kazakhstan, from all places. On a personal note, I'm not super big into it, but definitely more than most interested in Central Asian history and culture. So that's just really cool to me. And as a wrestler, I think he's great. His G1 matches last year against Callum Newman and David Finlay are both standouts for me in his career so far. And I don't think necessarily he's got a lot in the character department. There's not a lot that necessarily that grips me to him as a persona, but in ring, he is fantastic at putting a match together, especially for how little experience that he has. And I absolutely think that he could be, perhaps not IWGP Heavyweight Champion one day, but certainly challenging for it credibly. One thing I really would love to see this year is him and Aaron Wolf teaming up against Knockout Brothers. I think those would be great matches, and I would really like to see Aaron Wolf in there with Knockout Brothers. I think him and Boltin would be a great team. And so, yeah, I'm a really big fan of Boltin Oleg, and I'm really hopeful for his future in New Japan. Next up, we have Callum Newman, who is the current IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Something that, if you said that a year ago, people would think that you're crazy. Funny enough, it was Secure Genesis in 2025 where he filled in for Jeff Cobb, and everybody, including me, criticized the fact that this kid, who had a negative win-loss record in New Japan, was challenging for the World Heavyweight title. And 1 year later, he successfully defeats Yota Tsuji. It now come that surprised a lot of people. It kind of surprised me, but also I kind of saw it coming. I figured that he was going to drop it back at Dominion to Tsuji, which appears to be what's going to happen. But I like Callum Newman. I really enjoy this iteration of him. I was not a fan of his for the first 2 years or so on the roster, and I remember going into the G1 last year. The A block looked really solid, but I was like, fuck me, Callum Newman is here, I'm not going to enjoy his matches. But that is when he started leaning more into this heel persona that he had, and he proved me wrong, and I've really enjoyed him since then. I think he's a great wrestler. I would go back to that G1. I loved that entire A block last year. I'd look for his matches against Taichi, Boltin Oleg, Yuya Uemura, Ryoi Iwa, even Sonata. Like, he had a great run that year, and I've enjoyed his time as champion. But I'm also glad it's coming to an end. I think if he was champion, like through the G1 or something, it would really wear out its welcome. But all things considered, him dropping it back in June, New Japan just lost their 2 top heels at the same time. They lost David Finlay and they lost Evil, and they're trying to replace them with Callum Newman and Ren Narita, respectively. understand why they wanted to do something that seems so out of left field to establish Callum Newman as a credible threat going forward. He will always be a former IWGP champion. You can't take that away from him, and for that reason, he's always going to be a formidable heel for any opponent. So, long story short, I'm a fan of Callum Newman now, and I look forward to his next few years with New Japan if it's true that he signed a multi-year contract. So here we have Chase Owens. I'd say that he's probably my least favorite wrestler on the roster, but it's not probably. He is my least favorite wrestler on the roster. He doesn't upset me as much anymore as he was a few years ago because he was included in 3 straight G1s, which was maddening, especially 2023, where you had Satoshi Kojima on commentary for these matches, and it was like, imagine if you had Satoshi Kojima and the World Heavyweight Champion Sonata in this block along with all these new young guys, right? It'd be perfect. All the young guys face each other, the World Champion and this aging veteran in his last G1, but instead it's fucking Chase Owens, who had one of the worst matches I've ever seen with Hikuleo, and one of the most absurd things I've ever seen when he beat Gabe Kidd. He's moved away from that. He's never going to be in G1 again, so he's not really as upsetting to me anymore. He's kind of a funny promo. He can be. But he has been in this company for nearly 11 years, and he has not had one match that I can remember. And that's all I really need to say about him. So here we have Doki, the current IWGP Heavyweight Champion. And it's a sad situation, honestly. Doki was one of my favorite guys on the roster for a long time. Even before his initial big push started, I can remember when you had Yoshihashi, Tomohiro and Hiroki Goto as the Trios champions, and they defended against Zack Sabre Jr., Taichi, and Doki. And that was the first match where Doki got this featured spot as this is a guy that you should pay attention to going forward, and he slowly picked up more and more wins every Best of Super Juniors year after year until he got his really big push in 2024, and I thought all of that was awesome. And then they made the decision to turn him heel, which is insane. I think that you can kind of understand the logic that they didn't want him in Hontai with Wato, and they wanted the big junior heel. But it really just hasn't panned out. In retrospect, he should have joined unaffiliated, especially with Roma Takahashi leaving. He would fit in perfectly with Unbound Company, as it's called. But instead you have what I consider to be one of the worst title reigns I've ever seen of any title, of any company. Every match I've disliked. Every match has had a finish I've hated, especially the anniversary show where he should have dropped it. And it's just gone on and on and on and on. He skipped Wrestle Kingdom, he didn't defend the New Year's Dash, and he's not in the Best Super Juniors. And the fact that replacing the reigning IWGP champion with a young lion in the Best of Super Juniors is a benefit to the tournament is really all you need to know. I hope they can find a way to return him to a babyface, because Doki himself is a fantastic wrestler and a fantastic character. But as of right now, I need the title off of him as soon as possible, and he needs to go down to the undercard because I hate watching him right now. And speaking of that young lion, we have Daiki Nagai, the young lion of the Unbound Company faction, and currently a participant in the Best of the Super Juniors tournament. His most recent match, as of this recording, was against Francesco Akira in the Best of Super Juniors, and I think it was easily the best match of Daiki Nagai's career. Akira gave him a ton, and you really believe that Nagai had it at plenty of moments. I think there's a ton of upside to this kid. I remember when he debuted alongside Masatora Yasuda, and they were just beating the piss piss out of each other in a way that you usually don't see young lions doing, especially right when they debuted. And I do think that he had a lot of momentum at the beginning of his career that kind of slowed down over time. But that match with Akira was proof of concept for who this guy can be going forward. And I'm really happy Doki got injured or whatever happened. That sounds mean, but I'm happy that Daiki Nagai is in this tournament. He's not going to get any points, but that's fine. I'm happy he's getting these reps. He's getting to work with these guys. And I absolutely believe that one of these days, maybe even as soon as 2 years down the line, 3 or 4 years down the line, he is going to be a major player in the junior division. Here we have Dick Togo, who, just makes me laugh. Like, it's Dick Togo. I think even at the peak of House of Torture's unbearable hold on the top of the card around the time they first formed, I think Dick Togo's pretty fucking funny. I think he's a welcome addition to the roster. I'm always happy to see him doing, the dick contact spot and just getting his ass kicked all the time. And yeah, I love Dick Togo. I'm unashamed about that fact. I think he's hilarious. Here we have Don Fale. I just call him Bad Luck Fale still. It's Bad Luck Fale. That's who he's always gonna be. But Bad Luck Fale, Don Fale. You know what you're getting with Fale in 2026. He's not a good wrestler. He's hardly even a mobile wrestler. But he's very funny. I think he's very self-aware about who he is on the card and the fact that he is unable to do anything significant in the ring again. But you can't watch a Bad Luck Fale promo and not laugh. And so for that reason, I'm never gonna have a super negative opinion about him. As long as he's never in a G1 again or something. I think he would die if he tried to work a G1 again, actually. And I'm pretty sure he's a scammer with the whole Fale Dojo thing, but that's its own thing. So here we have Dan Maloney, or Drilla Maloney. It's always weird to me that his official ring name is Drilla now, because I guess I compare it to if you made Seth Rollins' ring name freaking Rollins, that's kind of how it feels to me. But I like Dan Maloney a lot as a wrestler. I think his peak was that first year he had in the company. My favorite thing about 2023 in New Japan may well be the feud between Catch Tutu and the War Dogs, Maloney and Clark Connors. And I thought Maloney was just awesome during that whole feud, and I thought that he looked really promising as a guy who could eventually lead Bullet Club. That's not exactly how things panned out. I think both David Finlay and Gabe Kidd kind of lapped him over time. But he's still a really good wrestler. I'm really happy that he decided to stick around another year in Japan and bet on himself rather than just move on with the rest of the War Dogs. I'm sure he was offered that contract, but I think it's really cool that he's decided to go a year solo and kind of see what he can make of himself. I never would have expected him to work well as just a clean cut. He's essentially at this point just a white meat babyface, which he was working as when he first debuted with the United Empire in the Best Super Juniors, and that really didn't work that well. But right now, I think he's very easy to get behind. The fans love him. His tag team with Shingo is great and has done a lot for him, and I would love to see them compete for the tag titles against Knockout Brothers. And yeah, I'm a fan of Maloney, and I'm happy to have him around for another year, and I hope it all goes well for him. Here we have El Desperado. Despy is kind of a weird one for me, because I could never call him a bad wrestler. He's obviously not. He's one of the best juniors on the planet, and he has been for years. But I think that his booking has been a massive problem in the past year. I think he has severely overstayed his welcome at the top of the junior division. And, I'm someone who 3, 4, 5 years ago when the two guys at top were Despy and Hiromu, I was a way bigger fan of Desperado than I was of Hiromu. I didn't really care for Hiromu, to be quite honest with you. But, we can compare Hiromu Takahashi's 2025 and Despy's 2025. Hiromu Takahashi put over Kosei Fujita, he put over Dragon Dia, he put over Akira, and he put over Robbie X. And then by and large, he fucked off. He got out of the way. He did his own thing. He worked in Noah. He did heavyweight stuff. He had that great tag team with Finlay, and he let the junior division, which is full of young talent, kind of develop itself without him being there to hog up the spotlight. Compare that to Desperado, who, lost to Yo in the Best of Super Juniors. And then when Fujita had his title challenge, he postponed it so he could go work deathmatch stuff with Jun Kasai. And then he came back and he fucking beat Fujita, which I thought was insane. I still think that's insane. And then the one young guy he decided to put over was Doki, which has become one of the worst reigns I've ever seen, as I said earlier. And then at Wrestle Kingdom, he fucking wins again, and then he loses to Doki again. So I like Despy as a wrestler, but goddamn, they need to get the title off of Doki, and then him and Desperado need to be as far away from that title as possible. And let Francesco Akira, let Master Wato, let Kosei Fujita, let Robbie X even, let these guys hang on the title picture. Let fucking Nick Wayne. Alright, Nick Wayne's cool. Desperado, he's a good wrestler, but I've had enough of him at the top of the card, and I hope that those days are numbered. And then there's El Fantasmo, who is very popular among both domestic and Western audiences, and he's just someone I don't really understand. When I started watching New Japan, he was, think of El Fantasmo when he was teaming with Ishimori, when he had the Rev Pro Junior title, when he was a complete menace to Will Ospreay and Robbie Eagles. That was the ELP that I started out with, and that is easily my favorite version of him. I loved him back then. He was one of my favorite guys in the entire roster. Nowadays, I just don't really connect with him. 2024 especially, he was doing, I'm sorry to be pompous, but I'd call it WWE shit, when he was running like a depressed gimmick and he was reaching out for Hikuleo, who wasn't there during the G1 for like a tag, and then that ridiculous segment where he was given a House of Torture shirt and walked around the entire building debating whether to put it on, which made me laugh out loud. He's had some good matches. Obviously, Konosuke Takeshita, he's had a great match with them, but that's Konosuke Takeshita. But he hasn't really been present in New Japan this year at all. He dropped the title to Konosuke Takeshita at New Beginning in America, and he really hasn't done anything. He was definitely in the New Japan Cup off the top of my head. I think he lost first round to both an Oleg, I believe. And he really hasn't done anything since then, and I don't want to be a dick and say that I'm happy he's gone, but I certainly am happy that people who I think probably deserve it more will get a G1 spot over him. So, yeah, ELP is just someone who I can't connect with in the way that a lot of people seem to be able to. So, Francesco Akira, he's a funny one to me, I cannot think of a wrestler in a long time who is so held back by the way he looks and the way his voice sounds, right? I'm just being honest, when he talks, it's the voice of a child. And so he's a fantastic wrestler, but it's been very hard for me to connect with him for extended periods of time throughout his career. As I said earlier, Ken Jutu and the War Dogs, fantastic. That whole feud, especially how it all culminated at New Beginning in 2024, with Akira kind of being the emotional centerpiece of that feud, I thought was great. But then after Osprey left, United Empire kind of, what's the word? They just kind of collapsed for a while, and I think he kind of suffered a lot during that period. But right now, he is working as a straight up heel, and I think it's great. Anyone like that who just kind of looks like a guy that you can't take seriously, I think it is the best when they're working as pieces of shit who are beating up the guys that you like, and they're being assholes about it, and you're like, fuck you, you look like you're 10, but you just beat my favorite wrestler. And so I think he's had a fantastic run in this Best Super Juniors. As I said earlier, he took Daiki Nagai to his best match of his career so far, and I think that's a massive credit to Francesco Aguirre and how hard he worked to put Daiki Nagai over. And I'm really hoping he makes it out of the block. I would absolutely choose him and Fujita to make it out of the block, out of the 10 guys in there. And I'm really happy he's a heel now. I think he has a really exciting future ahead of him under Callum Newman's leadership. Here we have Gato. I don't really know what to say. Sorry. I know I'm not going to talk about his booking because it's really up in the air just how much control he has unilaterally over the booking and how many heads are in that room at that point. At this point, sorry. I know Dick Togo has a lot of influence. I know Toriano is in there as well. I'm going to assume Urish Tanahashi, so in terms of booking, I'll just talk about him as a wrestler. As a wrestler, in ring, he's old and washed, but that's fine. As a manager, I think he's great. He's hilarious. I think he knows how funny he sounds when he speaks English, and so he really amps it up. And Gato and Jay White is one of my favorite manager-wrestler pairings of all time. You know, truly thick as thieves. They complement each other so well. I don't really know if he's ever going to have a guy like that again. He's in a weird position right now because he's not really a manager for anyone. He's the manager of the entire faction, but he had Okada and then Jay White and then David Finlay, and now he doesn't have his guy. And so we'll see how his career goes on from here. But yeah, Gato's funny. He's a good fall guy. What more could you ask for? Here we have Great-O-Khan. I don't like Great-O-Khan. It's just kind of that simple. I don't like his matches. I don't like how he wrestles. He's had some peaks throughout his career. He's obviously very funny, and I think he has a very good theatrical sense, I would say, but I just don't like watching his matches that much, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. Hinare is someone who I've kind of gone through phases of enjoying and not enjoying. I really liked him when he first joined United Empire, and I thought he had a really cool look, a really cool persona and gimmick. And he did have one of my favorite matches of all time, which was him and Gabe Kidd during the New Beginning tour leading up to that cage match, which ended in a draw. And I give both them credit for how fucking awesome that match was. And the cage match also is one of my favorites ever, which he was a part of, and he fucking nearly died in that match, so I guess I give him a lot of credit for his work during that program. What I would say about Hinare today is that, well, I think that he is a competent wrestler, and I don't dislike him. When I see him included in a G1 lineup, I often think, why is he in here over someone else? That someone else is usually Taichi, you know? And so, I don't hate Hinare, but I do think that I hope that he is considered kind of near the cutting block for big tournament inclusions as we start getting these younger guys coming in, returning from excursion, etc. Harley Jackson is really cool. I think it's awesome that a guy like him is getting this late career resurgence. He got to win titles at Wrestle Kingdom. He couldn't wrap the trios title around his waist because he's so fucking big, which I thought was hilarious. It literally didn't fit. He had an awesome match with both an Oleg defense against Bishamon and Bolton, along with the rematch, was great. And yeah, Harley Jackson's awesome. He's not going to be a singles title holder. He's not going to be in the G1, but I think he knows that, and he's a guy who's been in the game for a long, long time, and is getting this opportunity to represent the stable that he founded as New Japan kind of makes TMDK into their own thing. And so yeah, I think that's really cool. I love Harley Jackson. Hiroki Goto is the fucking man. Like, what else can you say? I feel so lucky as a wrestling fan that I got to be around to witness his career resurgence in the past 2 years, and him finally winning the World Heavyweight title, which I thought would just never happen. And if it were up to me, he would have held that title all the way through to Wrestle Kingdom, and then drop it to Yota Tsuji. I think he's awesome, and in a time where, you know, like 2024, 2023, that kind of era was pretty dire for New Japan, right? Because Kota Ibushi gone, Jay White gone, Kazuchika Okada gone, Will Ospreay gone, Tetsuya Naito gone. The top of the card from the decade prior just fucking vanishes, right? And I really credit, I'd say, David Finlay, Hiroki Goto, and Zack Sabre Jr. in picking up that slack and not only working at a super elite level, but bringing the young generation up with them in the way that those aforementioned guys would have if they were still around. So, you know, beyond like the world title match and all that, Hiroki Goto and David Finlay's, that was a blood feud, okay? That sort of real anger and animosity and heat is something that you beg for as a booker, and him and David Finlay, of all people, achieved it throughout their trilogy of matches. I love all three of those matches in the G1 at King of Pro Wrestling, and David Finlay's title challenge after Goto won the world title. That stuff was just fucking awesome, and I don't have enough good things to say about Hiroki Goto. He's awesome. I wish he held the title for longer. And yeah, that's the fucking GOAT, man. Hiroyoshi Tenzan is someone who, obviously, as I said, I started watching this company only 7 years ago. I was not around at all when this guy had his peak, but, you know, he won the G1 3 times across 4 years, right? Not even Ibushi managed to pull that off when he was getting his mega push. So, Tenzan is retiring, and I think he's retiring during the G1 semifinals show at Ryogoku, and so, you know, hats off to obviously a very, very successful career, and I hope he has a good life post-retirement. Jado is just my favorite person in the world. Babyface Jado being the manager for the Tongans was just so, like, endearing to me, and his desire to see them succeed felt so genuine and real. And the babyface turn for the Gorilla's Destiny and Jado, I thought, was just all really well done. And he provided one of the funniest moments in wrestling history when not only did they have him, like, slow walk to the ring at Dominion in 2020 to interfere in the world title match, but then they had Ishimori sprint past him as well. The Bullet Club Jado, like, 30 years this biz gimmick was fucking hilarious, and yeah, Jado's my fucking boy. I love Jado. Jake Lee is in some ways an unfortunate story because while he was never the best wrestler, and I think everyone kind of can believe that, he did suffer what seemed to be a pretty horrible injury in the autumn of 2024, right when he had this tag team with Gabe Kidd that seemed to have a lot of potential. And it does look to be one of those injuries where he's never going to be the same guy that he was. And it's a shame because not only does it suck for anybody, but in terms of character work, Jake Lee is really good. And he's very funny, and he kind of reminds me of Kenta's New Japan run, where Kenta was a guy who wasn't ability that he had in the past, but he did this very funny character where to kind of make up for it and force you to pay attention to him anyways. Jake Lee is someone who's doing something very similar, I think, and it works because although, yeah, he's not the best in the ring, I would love to see him in the G1. I want to see Jake Lee interact with Aaron Wolf. I want to see Jake Lee interact with Yuto Nakashima, right? I want to see how these characters react to someone as fucking weird as Jake Lee. And I think he's a hilarious part of the United Empire. After Newman won the title and then retained it over Shingo, you know, Jake Lee is there, like, prancing around with his clown makeup on as the rest of them are all standing there all serious. Like, it works really well. And so, it sucks what happened, but I'm happy that he's found a way to keep himself relevant, and I think the fact that he has managed to do so in spite of his physical limitations proves that he is a talented pro wrestler. Here we have Jacob Austin Young of the United Empire. You know, you see the term "caw" thrown around to describe wrestlers, like, as in create a wrestler from the WWE games. And that term "caw" is used to describe a wrestler that is just very plain and default. And Jacob Austin Young is the most caw wrestler I've seen in a while. And I hate saying that because he's clearly a very hardworking guy. He's been in the industry for, I think, 13 years now. But he's having his best of the Super Juniors run right now. And man, there's just nothing to really say about him. He's technically competent. He's not bad, but he really is just Jacob Austin Young. And you can't really say anything too definitive or remarkable about him. And yeah, I'm sorry that was quite mean, but I don't really have anything else to say about him. Kushida is another guy who I was not around for his peak. You know, I know kind of like the mid-2010s. He was a really big deal in New Japan. I distinctly remember, I think I learned what New Japan was because I saw clips of the final of the Best of the Super Juniors in 2015 between him and Kyle O'Reilly, and that spot where, I don't know which one did which, but one of them jumped off the steps on the other one, and the other one caught them in an armbar. I remember seeing that, and I think that's how I learned kind of what Japanese wrestling was. For context, I'm 24 years old. I was like 13, right? I was a young fan. I only kind of knew WWE back then. But obviously, he returned in 2022, and I've really enjoyed him since then. One of my favorite matches of last year was him and Kosei Fujita in the Best Super Juniors. I was really disappointed that they were not in the same block this year, and I hope that maybe Kushida can get second place, Fujita can get first place in his block, and they can still meet in the semifinals. But from what I can recall off the top of my head, it's not looking good in that tournament for Kushida right now. He's like 1-4, and he hasn't had as exciting of a tournament as I would have expected from someone who I really do like a lot. I really enjoy wrestlers like him who can wrestle quick and flashy if they need to, but are ultimately ground-based technical wrestlers. And so I understand that he's not the wrestler he was, but in the time that I've seen him in New Japan, I've really enjoyed Kushida. Konosuke Takeshita. This guy is... It's really arguable about whether or not he even is a New Japan wrestler. I would consider him one. He does appear on enough shows, but obviously he is an AEW guy. I would call him ultimately an AEW guy. We know who pays him more. We know who he would choose if he had to choose between one or the other. And I am a New Japan purist. I don't like American wrestling, and I can get pretty annoying about it. When the G1 finals were set to be him and Evil, of all people, I did not watch New Japan until, like, from that point on, I didn't watch the G1 final, and I didn't watch wrestling, period. I've had my problems with Konosuke Takeshita. That being said, I'm not going to deny that he is a fantastic wrestler, and I don't think that the world title should ever be on guys who ultimately are not loyal to the company. But he had a fantastic match with Yonezuchi at Wrestle Kingdom. He tapped out to the Boston Crab, which I was blown away by. And right now he's Raw Television Champion. I have no problem with that. He's a great wrestler. I think it's a great title to put him on him and have him do these 15-minute sprints. You know, he had a really good match that went to a draw with Shota Umino. And right now he's going to wrestle Sonata in his return in New Japan, which I'm looking forward to. He has wrestled in the past two G1s and has had good runs. I didn't really care for the B block as a whole last year, so I can't comment too much on that. But I remember 2024, I loved his matches with David Finlay and Hiroki Goto. And, you know, the guy put Bolton all back over. You can't say that the guy refuses to do business. He absolutely will. So, if I could choose, you know, anyone from AEW, I would probably want to have someone new, just because I think that should kind of be a rotating position. I would love to have Andrade over this year, but Konosuke Takeshita is obviously like one of the best in the world, and as a wrestler, I've got nothing bad to say about him. And right now, I'm very happy with how he's used in New Japan, and I know that he just won either the international or continental title. I don't know which one, but he won one of them. I really doubt that he will drop the TV title before he drops that, but he can hold the TV title for the rest of the year for all I care. So yeah, my tribalistic tendencies aside, Konosuke Takeshita is a good wrestler. Kosei Fujita, the future of the junior division, in my opinion. And I'm someone who's not nearly, I think, as high on him as a lot of people seem to be. I've known people who have called him one of the greatest young lions of all time. Like, specifically talking about his work when he was a young lion and how quickly he progressed. But obviously he's fucking awesome. He is having a great run in the best of the Super Juniors right now, especially his match with Jun Kasai. And, you know, he is a babyface in technicality, but I think this guy is a naturally born heel. He's incredibly dislikable in how much of a fucking cunt he is when he wrestles, especially against other babyfaces. He's very disrespectful, very cocky, very punishing, and very happy to shit talk opponents after he beats them. So I think this guy has future as a heel. Not in House of Torture, God forbid, but definitely I think this guy has a really bright future, and he's 23 years old. He's younger than me, which is insulting to me, frankly. But yeah, Kosei Fujita is great, and I would have no problem with him winning Best of the Super Juniors a second year in a row. He should have won the fucking title last year. Masatori Asada came up with Daiki Nagai as Young Lions. I don't really have anything to say about Masatori Asada. I don't pay attention to the Young Lions too much, and he has probably stuck out the least to me in his current set. But that's not to say he's bad, and that's not to say he doesn't have a future. Most Young Lions do have good futures in New Japan, so let's see where he goes. Master Wato is a really interesting one because, at least from my perspective, he's obviously consistently over, it feels like anyways, with the domestic audience. From my perspective, he's a bit similar to Shota Umino in the sense that he is constantly kind of riding the line between connecting and not connecting. And sometimes I get really behind him, and sometimes I'm like, this guy's a fucking scrub, and he's nowhere near, you know, Kosei Fujita or Francisco Aguirre. I was the most behind Wato I've ever been leading up to this recent anniversary show where he obviously should have won, and he just didn't for some fucking reason. One of the most baffling decisions I've seen New Japan make ever. And I'll be honest, I'm not really high on him at this moment in time when I watch this Best of the Super Juniors. He's having good matches, but I'm way more interested in, like I said, Kosei Fujita and Francisco Akira, who he shares a block with. And honestly, out of that block, I'm more interested in Robbie X and Titan and Nick Wayne and Valiente Jr. than I am in Master Wato. I think he's just a guy whose look and gimmick doesn't do him any favors. I'm glad he's no longer blue, to be fair. But it just kind of is what it is. Sometimes you either can or can't connect with a guy, and there's no real way to explain why it is either way. But Master Wato is just one of those guys. Oscar. I'm very happy to talk about Oscar. In wrestling, if you're in a tag team, I keep saying, by the way, I've noticed that, but if you're in a tag team, you're either the Shawn Michaels or you're the Marty Jannetty. And even if your partner is like a tenth of a decimal better than you or hotter than you, hotter as in better connection with the audience, more popular, you are the Jannetty. And relative to Yuto Nakashima, Oscar Lloyd is the Jannetty. But Oscar is fucking awesome. I cannot remember the last big guy who can move in the way he does. He is an amazing wrestler. He has put on such fantastic performances equal to Yuto in these Knockout Brother Tag Team title defenses, especially the two matches they've had this year with Zack Sabre Jr. and Ryohei Iwa. Oscar, when you watch his backstage promos, he is one of the funniest promos on the roster right now. You can tell that as a shoot in real life, this guy is a really good judge of character, has a very sharp mind, because he is really good at immediately breaking into a wrestler's psyche and tearing them apart verbally. One of my favorite quotes in wrestling is when he told Shota Umino, if you ever developed the capacity to feel shame, you would never recover. It's just perfect, especially from a guy who is English second language. I am so excited to see Oscar in the G1. I want to see him in there with Aaron Wolf. I want to see him face Yota Tsuji and Konosuke Takeshita. I want to see a rematch with Callum Newman. I want to see him have a freak off with Jake Lee. Like, there's so many guys on the roster I want to see him face. And I love Oscar. An underrated match, I think, and I can't remember what the date of the show was, but there was leading up to his New Japan Cup match with Callum Newman. And I think they were in Korakuen Hall for this match. There was a preview tag where it was Oscar and Dan Maloney against Callum Newman and Zane J. If you're the kind of person to skip preview tags, absolutely seek that match out. It was awesome from all four of those guys. But Oscar is fucking awesome. His upside is massive, and I can't wait to see where his career goes. Ren Narita is fumbling right now, I think. And I don't really know what you do with him. I don't think Ren Narita has ever had a consistent streak of really good matches. And they've put him into Evil's spot, and he's just not that guy. I loved Evil. Ren Narita is not Evil. He's coming off of a match that I think was the best of his heel run against Bolton Oleg at Wrestling Dontaku. And that was a match where he wrestled as a technical wrestler, and he broke Bolton Oleg's body down. And if that's the direction he needs to go, I think that's a very good direction for him. I think it might be the only direction for him. Ren Narita is the worst out of his class, I think, and we'll see where he ends up, man. I don't know. Robbie Eagles. Robbie is one of my favorite guys on the roster, and pretty much has been my was turning babyface and being kicked out of the Bullet Club by El Phantasmo and Taiji Ishimori. And I just think he's so easy to get behind. He kind of floundered at first as a babyface, but once he joined TMDK and he got that edge to him, I have loved his work since then. I remember after he joined TMDK, it was 2023 and at Best of the Super Juniors, and he had his match with Yo, who was his former partner in Chaos. Then Yo started teaming with Leo Rush. Robbie was offended, that's why he joined TMDK in the first place. And he beat Yo, and he was a dick about it, but he was still a babyface. And I was like, okay, this is who Robbie Eagles needs to be. And I really hope he gets another junior title reign. He's had one already, but it wasn't too remarkable to me. But I would love to see this version of him win the title at some point. Right now, he is in Best Super Juniors, and he's having that booking where like he's losing all of his matches at the beginning, which makes me think, he's gonna win them all at the end and make it through to the tournament finals. He better advance from this block. I think having anyone that's not Robbie, Kushida, and Ishimori advance out of this block would be criminal. But I really hope that it's a Robbie Eagles and Kosei Fujita final. I don't know if they'd ever do something like that, but I think that'd be awesome. And yeah, Robbie's the best. Robbie X. Talk about a guy who I shouldn't like. I don't like American wrestling. I don't like quote unquote flippy shit. I don't like guys who are really small. And yet Robbie X has totally won me over. He didn't at first, and I didn't really care much for him until the start of the year. But this Best of the Super Juniors run has been awesome. He has had matches specifically with Kosei Fujita, Jun Kasai, and his most recent match with Titan, which were 3 totally different matches, and he was excellent in all of them. Seeing him go head to head with Jun Kasai like that was so cool. Did a lot for his character, and he has won over the Japanese audience in a really impressive way. I don't know if he'd ever be a junior title contender or anything like that, but certainly he is doing way better than I thought he would, and I'd consider myself a really big fan of him. Ryohei Iwa. The upside with this guy is obvious. He is straight out of, 90s Puroresu with his look and his style. Just a big, hard-hitting, mean piece of shit, but also very likable. So far, his best performances have been in matches involving Zack Sabre Jr. and Yuto Ice, whether that's him facing Zack in the New Japan Cup or teaming with Zack against the Knockout Brothers. He had a really good G1 last year. I think this G1 is going to be a breakout thing for him. I think he should top whatever block he's in, honestly. And, put him, Yuya, and Yuto Ice in the same block, and you can make magic happen. Here we have Ryusuke Taguchi, another one of the older generation, someone you could classify as the New Japan dads. He is probably the most mobile out of this group and is still able to put on some good matches. Obviously, his peak was a long time ago, and nowadays he's mostly a comedy wrestler, and I don't like his comedy stuff because I am grossed out by his pasty ass. But I still appreciate him, that he can pull out a good match, and he will if he needs to put someone over properly. And I'm really glad I got to see him in the Best of the Super Juniors 3 years ago when he did his whole gimmick in that tournament was, I'm gonna wrestle at Serious Taguchi. And I specifically remember his match with Apollo. Apollo, that's still tag team. His match with Mike Bailey being really good. So yeah, I like Taguchi overall. And here we have Sonata, who is really an interesting story. A wrestler who has had so many ups and downs throughout his career. I began watching New Japan in the G1 in 2019, and Sonata was among the first wrestlers who I really became a fan of. That was the G1 where he got his first victory over Kazuchika Okada with that awesome finish where he went for the second moonsault when there was only about 10 seconds left in the match, and everyone was freaking out. Rocky Romero was screaming at him on commentary, etc. It was really good. And I just really took to him. And being a Sonata fan, his career just reaches such highs and then reaches such lows, and it happens so quickly. Like, he had that match, he beat Okada, and then he challenged him for the World Championship, and he lost. And 2020, he makes it to the finals of the G1 against Ibushi, and he loses. 2021, he doesn't do a whole lot, except for have some really fun feuds with, teaming with Tetsuya Naito against Dangerous Tekkers, Zack Sabre Jr. and Taichi, and that was really good. And then he wins his first singles title beginning in 2022 when he beats Tanahashi for the United States title, which he then has to vacate after being injured by Will Ospreay, and then Will Ospreay beats him for the title when Sonata returns. So, and then after that, the rest of 2022 was just, he was completely floundering, right? He couldn't pick up any major victories. He lost to Manabu Soya when LIJ faced the Congo stable from Noah. But then the New Japan Cup happens in 2023, and he leaves LIJ, joins, or forms, he joins just 4 guys, and makes it just 5 guys. And he goes to the finals, he beats David Finlay, and he challenges Okada again for the world title, and he actually finally does it, which is one of my personal favorite moments I've ever experienced as a wrestling fan, was watching Sonata finally beat Okada for the world title after so many years of failure for him. It was really great to see. And his reign was, he defended against Hiromu, which was good. He defended against the returning Yota Tsuji, which was good. And I do think Sonata did a very good job carrying himself as champion. He goes into the G1. He's in the block with all the young boys, which, if you follow certain rumors, was meant to be Kazuchika Okada. But I liked his G1 that year. I thought he had good matches. And then he loses to Evil. He feuds with Evil. I thought that feud was awful. And I'm usually a fan of Evil, but I did not like that feud. Yoshinobu Kanemaru turning heel was really stupid, didn't make any sense. And then the end of Sonata's reign was marked by him refusing to do anything to build up hype for the Wrestle Kingdom match with Naito. And he really came off as a jabroni, and then he lost. But then there was the really cool angle after Wrestle Kingdom where he saved Naito from getting beat down by Evil and Dick Togo, and you thought, okay, so this is and then he cried, and it's like, okay, Sonata really does care about this stuff, and let's see where he goes from here. And then bizarrely, they book him in an immediate rematch with Naito, which he loses again, which I thought was so strange. I don't know why they did that. If I remember correctly, that show was in Taichi's home prefecture. I can't say it, prefecture. And either way, I really think it would have made a lot more sense because that show was like an LIJ versus Just Five Guys show. Swap out Sonata and Taichi, give Sonata victory over Shingo Takagi to re-establish him, and give Taichi a world title match that he loses to Naito. I thought that would have made way more sense. But they ran Sonata again, and then he got injured, and he just really wasn't the same after that, unfortunately. And then he goes to G1, he gets 8 points. This is your world champion the year before, and he gets 8 points. And then he joins War Dogs, and then he joins House of Torture, and at that point it's like, wow, we are so far removed from who this guy was in 2023 when he was on top of the world. And his wrestling took a big hit from whatever injury he suffered, although I will say his G1 last year, I actually thought he was having some very good matches. So he's not all washed, but certainly like it's a shame. You know, they put a lot behind this guy and it just didn't really work out for him. But I'm happy he's back. I was genuinely very sad when it looked like he was leaving the company, so I'm happy he's back. And I don't know if like I can take or leave him being a guy who's like in G1s every year and stuff, but certainly I'm happy to see Sonata. He's funny, I think he's self-aware. I think he knows his limits at this point, and it's just building a career that he can work comfortably in, and, you know, more power to the guy. But, yeah, I doubt I will talk about anyone as long as I just spoke about Sonata, but it's been a very tumultuous journey being a fan of his for the past 7 years. Sho is someone who, you know, wrestles a style. I don't know how to word that sentence. We know that he can wrestle better matches than he gives out as a member of House of Torture, right? That being said, I think there's been times where the gimmick has worked and times where it hasn't. I remember the fact that his first year or so of his run as a heel, I really liked him because he really leaned in to just be a complete nut job. But at this point, I think it's really worn out its welcome. My general thesis on House of Torture as a whole is that Evil made that stable what it was, and without him around, I can't really buy into it anymore. Satoshi Kojima, another one of the New Japan dads, definitely one that still can perform at a decently high level. Like I said earlier, it really bothers me that he never got, a proper send-off G1. If you look at G1s between like 2020 and 2023, he easily could have been in one of the spots that was instead taken up by Yujiro Takahashi or Chase Owens or Tangaloa. So, I like Kojima, and, you know, one or two singles matches from him a year, I'd appreciate. Like, I wish that he would be a first round, win for someone in the New Japan Cup, right? And hopefully he's in the G1 qualifiers this year as well. I'm always happy to see Kojima. Shingo Takagi, I think, just kind of speaks for itself. He's an extremely solid hand, unlikely to ever win the world title again, but if you need to establish a guy, put a guy over, and put him in the ring with someone who's going to make him look good, that guy is Shingo Takagi. That's exactly what he just did with Callum Newman at Wrestling Dontaku. Shomagato was another one from that Young Lion group I really liked. He had a pretty unique look and style and really evolved into himself throughout his time as a Young Lion. And I haven't watched any of his matches from CMLL where he's competing now, but I have seen what he looks like. And if you just go look up what he looks like in Mexico right now, you can tell this guy is going to come back and be a big deal. So I'm looking forward to that. Shota Umino, probably the most controversial of the Reiwa and that sort of time period class of young lions. A guy who oscillates constantly between putting it together and not having it and goes back and forth over and over and over again. I think that 2026 has been his best year so far, coming off of the matches with Yuya Mura, where they faced Taichi and Tomohiro Ishii, and then the Knockout Brothers. Those were both great showing for Shota Umino. And then his New Japan Cup run as well. And I think as a character, he's put it together. I can get behind him. I don't look at him as some glad-handing dork who, comes out and hugs babies like he was doing. Like, I think this guy, I look at him and I'm like, this guy really fucking wants it. And in my opinion, he is a front runner to win the G1. I think he will win the G1 this year. Hopefully in a final with Yuya Uemura. Speaking of Taichi, Taichi is one of my favorite wrestlers ever, period, of any company. When I was a WWE fan growing up in, the early to mid 2010s, there were guys like, I'd say, Antonio Cesaro or Dolph Ziggler, where they were really good and you watched it and you were like, why doesn't management get behind these guys? And that's how it feels to be a Taichi fan. I don't expect Taichi to be a world heavyweight champion, that's fine. But the fact that he does not get more singles matches throughout the year is insane to me. He is an amazing wrestler. He has such a great connection with the audience. He's such just an easy to root for babyface. And he has had so many great matches. It's hard to even come up with one. My mind immediately goes to him against Kota Ibushi in the G1 Climax in 2020, where they kick the shit out of each other. He was part of one of my favorite tag teams ever, Dangerous Deckers, and I just fucking love Taichi so much, and I wish that he was valued more by the company, because I think that he will always have a lot to offer. Taiji Ishimori is someone who, at least in New Japan, he's been in the junior division at the same time as Despi and Hiromu, and he's never really kind of cracked that junior ace status the way that the two of them have. But I think as time goes on, he's going to be remembered as one of the greatest of his era. I love Ishimori. I think he's a fantastic wrestler. He doesn't have bad matches. And he's an artist as well. If you watch those Taiji Ishimori Gets Ridiculous shows that he puts on, a couple times a year over the past few years, this guy has a really good comedic and artistic sense. He's super creative. And those shows honestly made me respect him a lot more as a professional wrestler, because that was a side of him that he hasn't been able to show in New Japan so far. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Taiji Ishimori. Taisei Nakahara is a super new young lion. Like, he debuted, I believe, on the New Japan Cup tour. It's either New Japan Cup or New Beginning off the top of my head, but either way, he's not even 3 months in. So we'll see how he develops over time. Tatsuya Matsumoto, a young lion who debuted alongside Saint J last summer. He's strong. He's got a great look, and he's picking up wins now over Nakahara pretty often. So yeah, I'm sure that he's got a bright future ahead of him. Tiger Mask, one of the other New Japan dads whose retirement is coming very soon. July 7th, I believe, is the date, which is just about a week short of his 35th anniversary as a professional wrestler, which is wild. And I know that this guy was a legend in the past. He's had a fantastic career. He's worked all over the world and earned respect from so many different wrestlers from so many different areas of the industry. And it's going to be a really cool event, and I'm glad I get to see him retire. Not that, like, I'm not gonna see him wrestle anymore, but I'm happy I can be around for what's certainly gonna be a really special event. And he also has one of the greatest themes in the history of professional wrestling. T-Don is one of the best junior heavyweights on the planet in terms of just pure wrestling ability. He probably is the best junior on the New Japan roster. He is currently on a. He just had his undefeated streak broken by Robbie X in the Best of the Super Juniors in an incredible match. So he's 5-1. Real ones will never forget T-Don making it to the finals of the Best of the Super Juniors 3 years ago out of nowhere, tapping out both Hiromu and El Desperado back to back. That was fucking crazy. T-Don is awesome, and my only wish is that we got to see more of him in New Japan, but it's kind of like Konosuke Takeshita. He is a New Japan wrestler, but New Japan is ultimately not the people who he is most dependent on financially, you could say, right? So yeah, T-Don rules. Togi Makabe, another one of the New Japan dads who I was not around for at his peak, but I can tell that he was really fucking cool back in the day. He is a former G1 Climax winner, or former IWGP heavyweight champion, and you can tell just fucking looking at the guy still, like this guy was fucking awesome when he was around. So yeah. And right on to his tag partner, Tomoaki Hanma, who never really reached the same heights as most of the older guys around him. But I always thought it was cool that I believe the way it worked was Togi Makabe founded Chaos. He either founded Chaos or, it was, he founded Great Bash Heel, and all of Great Bash Heel betrayed him to form Chaos except for Tomoaki Hanma. Tomoaki Hanma stood by Togi Makabe's side, and they've obviously been that close ever since. He has his voice, right, which he got because his voice box was crushed by a lariat or something. And he has his cool headbutt. So yeah, everyone likes Hanma. Oh, look, it's Hanma. Tomohiro Ishii, someone who has slowed down a lot throughout the years, but certainly still has a lot to give. I think as a tag guy, I really hope that him and Taichi's team is not over because I thought they were awesome. Their match with Shota Umino and Yuya Uemura on the New Beginning tour was one of my favorite matches all year. And he is a guy who, in this current era of New Japan, with all these young guys coming up, I think he can be really used to elevate them by bringing them up to the performances that you saw out of Shota and Yuya in that tag match. Toru Yano. There's really not much to say. I think that his act was getting a little bit tired by the end of his G1 inclusions, but now he's no longer in the G1, so I think he's fine. Yo is a wrestler I really liked at one point after the breakup of Roppongi 3K, and he had his run in the Best of the Super Juniors 2021 where he made it to the finals against Hiromu. I think that was the peak of his career so far. He really, really got the audience behind him and put on some great performances. You can kind of tell that as like a real person, he's a fucking weirdo. Even by some of the stuff he was doing before the breakup, but certainly once he became a singles wrestler, he has just been fucking strange. And I think that he has everything in. I think he has all the ability to still be the guy that he was during that Best of the Super Juniors run, but I think he kind of chooses not to be and does his own thing. thing, and sometimes he makes me laugh. Sometimes I'm pretty tired of him, but yeah. Next up is Yoshihashi, one of my favorite title reigns of all time. And that means like any title in any promotion was when he, Hiroki Goto, and Tomohiro Ishii held the Never Trios titles for what I believe was 434. I could be wrong. It was definitely over a year. And I'm gonna ignore how it ended. I hated that it ended as a torture. I think that they should have held those titles up until Wrestle Kingdom. Maybe dropped them to like Jeff Cobb, Great Khan, and RA, like a team like that. But regardless, the reign itself was awesome. It was a great story to tell because you had Yoshihashi winning his first championship, and that championship just so happened to be a title that nobody cared about. The team before that was Makabe and Yano and Taguchi, who held it for a year, and most of the time they didn't even bring it to the ring with them. So I thought it was a great story because instead of that being a detriment to Yoshihashi, he brought the titles along with them in many ways. They elevated one another because his defenses of those titles elevated the titles, and in turn, the titles elevated him because he carried those titles into the G1 in 2020 after he was left out of the G1 in 2019. And when you look at the talent that challenged for those, we're talking about the trios titles that nobody gives a shit about. And he defended them against, along with Goto and Tomohiro Ishii, of course, he defended them against Okada and Minoru Suzuki and Zack Sabre Jr. and Tetsuya Naito and Jay White and a whole host of really big names who wouldn't have challenged for these otherwise, most likely. And they had some fantastic matches, my favorite of which being, I mentioned earlier in the video, when they defended against Dangerous Deckers and Doki, which was Doki's first really big standout match. And I think the match that really put this reign on the map for me as well. So I will always think of that when it comes to Yoshihashi. Outside of that, he's a solid singles wrestler. I don't think he's someone who needs to be in the G1 anymore over other talents. But he's certainly not bad, and I think he can rest his hat on that Never Trios reign just being amazing, and in my opinion, the best thing to come out of pandemic era New Japan. Yoshinobu Kanemaru. I don't really have anything to say. I know that he was really good at one point and is very influential in the sense that he's trained a lot of modern wrestlers. I just don't really care for him. I think him joining House of Torture was really stupid. Not only from a storyline perspective, him portraying Taichi and Doki and Taka Michinoku just didn't really make sense, but even just from like a booking standpoint, what you missed out on, there was way more to tell with, or to do rather, with him and Doki as a tag team. They were massively over. They went on a losing streak in the World Tag League, but then beat the champions Catch 2-2. And I just think that they abandoned that really early in service of getting Yuya into just 5 guys and the Sonata and Evil feud. I don't think it was worth it. I don't think it went anywhere. I don't think anybody on the roster is better off for having Kanemaru in House of Torture. But he's a good wrestler. I'm not going to say otherwise. Yota Tsuji. Yota Tsuji is being set up as the next ace of New Japan in lieu of Okada leaving. That's how it feels anyways. Overall, I think he's doing a good job. Something I noticed at Secure Genesis when he defended against Callum Newman is that was was the first world title match that, well, where both competitors were young guys, quote unquote, guys who were coming up in 2022 and 2023 when they were pushing this whole thing about a new generation taking over the old guard. That was the first world title match where the champion was a member of that generation, so was the challenger. And I think both those guys played their parts very well, and Yota Tsuji was a believable wall for the challenger to overcome. I've really enjoyed his run this year overall. Tapping out Andrade and Takeshita with the Boston Crab was just really cool. His matches with both Takeshita and the rematch with Andrade and Totaku are some of my favorite matches of the year. I'd say especially the match with Andrade and Totaku. I thought that was awesome. I think, frankly, I'm not happy that KPA got injured, but I think it worked out for New Japan very well that he did, and it was Andrade in that spot as well, because I think it sits much better having Andrade beat Tsuji for the global title, and that match was just really good. So, do I think Yota Tsuji is at the level of Okada or Tanahashi? No. But do I think he is the best out of his generation crop of talent? Yes, I do. And I think he's doing a good job in the position that he's been put into. And it'll only get better as the future goes on. Yuji Nagata is another member of the quote-unquote old guard, the New Japan dads. I like Nagata. I believe that his career is also coming to an end fairly soon. I know that he's done with Blue Justice shows after this year, so his retirement will definitely be an emotional show for people who are around that long, and I think he's a really cool wrestler with a great personality. Yujiro Takahashi is, in terms of ring work, the worst guy on the roster who is not one of the older guys like Jado or Tenzan who are basically immobile due to their age. Yujiro just sucks. He's an actively dangerous worker sometimes. He's got a good gimmick, so I don't hate him, but yeah, he needs to retire. Yuto Ice, formerly Yuto Nakashima, is New Japan's current rising star who's debuted in the past year and is showing massive potential. He's gotten super over the audience, has his own style of wrestling, has his own character and philosophy that is based off of his real life self. This guy just has a massive upside. I think that's all there is to say. There's no point describing it. If you watch the company, you can see what this guy's future looks like, and I predict that both for him and Oscar, their G1s are going to be huge breakout periods, the two of them as singles competitors. And this guy has juice infused with Ryohei Iwa and Yuya Mura. Both of those are programs that can last for years and years and years. So very excited to see this guy's career progress. Speaking of Yuya Uemura, I gotta admit, I'm not as high on this guy as other people are. Some people seem to think that he is the next Tanahashi, and although they have similar personalities, Yuya has not wowed me in terms of his ring work as much as many of his peers have, and I believe that he is not, he hasn't shown the sort of fire that they have. He's had some good matches. He had a great match with both an Oleg in last year's G1, and actually had a good match with both an Oleg in this year's New Japan Cup as well, along with the final against Callum Newman. And I do think there's potential, as I said. Obviously there is, but like in his tag team with Shota, I thought Shota was his superior, and I'd really like this feud with Yuto Ice to continue, as Yuto Ice's whole gimmick seems to be bringing that fire and that rage out of his competitors and make them fight as hard as they can, and I think that's what Yuya needs. So I don't dislike him by any means, but I think he has more to prove. Zane J is kind of a young lion, kind of not. He has his own gear at this point in theme because he did wrestle before. He got into the No-Gi Dojo, but he hasn't won a match yet. He hasn't got a pinfall or a submission victory. So he's kind of in that limbo state that Daiki Nagai was in. Kevin Knight was in there for a while as well. But I love Sanjay. I think he's got loads of potential. He's hilarious. He's been seconding Jacob Austin Young and Francisco Aguirre to the ring in the Best Super Juniors. He's been really funny. I think he's got a good grasp of his personality, and he's genuinely super athletic and has a great look. So I think the sky's the limit for him. I would love a. I think he should be in the G1 qualifiers, the tournament they do to decide one of the block members, and give him a first round loss to Daichi or Hartley Jackson or something, and just give him a singles opportunity against a big, not massive name, but a decent name, kind of like how he had with Shingo Takagi, because I think he'd kill it, and I'd like to see him get more of those opportunities. And finally, truly saving the best for last, we have Zack Sabre Jr. In my time watching professional wrestling, Zack Sabre Jr. is my personal favorite wrestler ever. If I had to pick one, I think that currently he is the best in the world, putting out the best performances on a consistent level across a whole wide variety of opponents, while working a very restrained technical style that can still get the crowd as over as someone doing, flashy, spotty moves, what have you. Zack just has a unique mind for the business. He was the best wrestler in the company in 2024 and 2025, and I believe surely will be the best wrestler in the company in 2026. He consistently has the best matches on the roster, multiple matches of the year, every year. He is wildly influential in getting these young guys in New Japan over and helping develop them. Wrestlers like Umino and Tsuji and Narita and Iwa and Fujita and Bolden Oleg and Clark Connors and Gabe Kidd and Kevin Knight and Alex Coughlin, all and Yuto Ice and Oscar. All of these people either worked with Zack or have worked under Zack at various points in time. And beyond his work in New Japan, Zack Sabre Jr. holds seminars and wrestles independent promotions in Taiwan and the Philippines and Singapore and India and Chile. And he goes to these places that don't have much in the way of a proper infrastructure and scene for professional wrestling, and he helps develop that with his star power. He is a representative for pro wrestling worldwide. He is a representative for Japanese professional wrestling worldwide, and I think that he will go down as one of the best and most important, most influential wrestlers of his era. Zack Sabre Jr. is the GOAT, and there is nothing else to say.